I'm here with Noemi Gamel, a successful pediatric hospitalist from San Antonio, Texas, who after 8 years of advancing her career decided to make a change. Noemi, tell us about what you did.
In June of 2013, I sold my house, I sold my cars, I quit my job, and I moved to a small town in the highlands of Costa Rica with my husband and 2 children. And as glamorous and exciting as it sounds, it was also one of the scariest, most exhausting, and time-consuming things I've ever done.
Let's start off with some of the preparation steps for moving abroad. What are some of the first things someone needs to do to prepare?
I highly recommend that one of the first things someone who's relocating to another country does is identify a contact person in their destination country that will serve as a mentor or a guide. In fact, I recommend they identify 2 people, an expat from their home country as well as a local person. They will both be great resources of information, but they will both have different areas of expertise. For example, the expat will be able to give advice regarding visa issues, whereas the local person or the local contact will be able to provide more practical information about day-to-day living.
How can someone make those contacts in another country if they're not living there yet?
Excellent question. If the person's move is job related, then their company can help identify contacts in the destination country that can help guide them. Our children's school in Monteverde was a great resource of information, and they provided us with contacts for expat families from the U.S. that were able to answer questions for us, as well as local people that helped us answer day-to-day questions like where do I shop for groceries. The other really useful thing is a simple Google search will yield a list of expat coaching communities as well as expat blogs that can serve for information.
What does someone need to be most prepared for when moving abroad?
Be prepared for culture shock. You think that you won't experience it, but you will. If you move to a country where you don't speak the local language, culture shock will be even more amplified. It's so important to be familiar with the signs, symptoms, and treatment of culture shock in order to be able to mitigate its symptoms when they do strike. The first thing you experience when you first move to a country and the first part of culture shock is the honeymoon phase. Everything's new, everything's exciting, everything seems absolutely wonderful, just like you're honeymooning. But then later you start noticing the differences and you find it hard to adapt. For example, even little things can set you off. For example, for me, I became very upset one day when I couldn't find a potato peeler. But if you know that this is what you're going to go through, you know that this is what you're going to experience, you're able to face it much more predictably.
What can expats do to minimize the effects of culture shock?
Before moving, it is so important to establish an easy and inexpensive way to communicate with family back home. This is especially important if the person relocating has aging parents, like for example in my case, that are not comfortable with technology. It will really help ease the symptoms of culture shock to be able to talk and communicate with your loved ones back home. Yes, part of the experience is to go out and meet new people, but you will still need your support group from your destination country and the people that have always been there for you and loved you. The second phase of culture shock is the hostility phase, when everything just seems to be going wrong and you're having a hard time adapting. Like I said, for me, it was I couldn't find a potato peeler, but it'll pass. Culture shock will happen. The last phase of culture shock is adaptability. You learn how to adapt and live in your new country and learn to be happy.
How long does culture shock usually last?
Really, culture shock and the symptoms are different for everybody. For example, one of my expat friends went through that predictable cycle. The first few weeks was the honeymoon phase, but then she was in the hostility phase for a few months, and now she's easing into adaptability phase where she's very happy here and is actually thinking of moving back here after she's going to be here for 6 months and she's going to move back and then would actually like to come back for a longer period of time. For me, I would go through the symptoms of culture shock all in one day. I would wake up and feel I was honeymoon. I couldn't believe. I would look out the view of my front porch and think, wow, I can't believe I'm living here. This is so beautiful. But then something would happen and I would feel very hostile towards my environment. And then later in the day, I felt, you know what, it's okay.
How important is it to have all the details nailed down before getting on that plane?
There are some details that you absolutely have to have well set in stone before you move. For example, your finances. What are you going to do with all your stuff? What about your children's education? What about a job once you get there? But there are other details that can wait until you get there. For example, for us, we didn't have a house. We didn't have housing set up when we moved here. We arrived, we booked into a hotel, and then started looking around. We wanted to be able to see the houses that we were going to live in person, face to face. And I'm very glad we did. It took us about a week, but we found a house that we were very happy with and a wonderful landlord. So it just depends. Some details are important to arrange beforehand. With other details, you can just arrive and see what happens.
Let's shift perspectives a little now. Pretend someone's moved to another country, they've relocated, they're on location. What advice can you give them to help prepare them for that transition once they've arrived?
It is very important for new expats to establish a support group with other expats. Having that community support is very important because you will have a group of people that will understand what you're going through and can listen to you when you feel frustrated or you just want to vent. And at the same time, you can serve as a support for them.
Now, if they're reaching out to other expats in the community, are they truly experiencing the local culture, or are they just recreating their home culture in another country? What advice can you give so that they can make the transition and have a more enriching cultural experience?
It is very important that the newly relocated expat not only hang out with other expats. It is very important to reach out to the local community. For example, for us, we don't live in an expat community. We live in a Tico neighborhood. We're the only gringos up on this hill for quite a few blocks. And I love it because we get to practice our Spanish with our neighbors, and I also find that the local people are a great source of information for us. So it's very important to actually actively seek out the local experience. When you go to the farmer's market, talk to the vendors, make friends with them, talk to your neighbors if you live in a Tico neighborhood like we do, and reach out not just to the expat families in your children's school, but also the local families. And it'll really enrich your cultural experience, you'll learn the language faster, and your local friends will be a great source of information for you.
Are there any other benefits to getting to know the locals?
I have actually found that the prices at the farmer's market and my favorite coffee shop have gone down since the vendors and the owners have realized that I live here.
Anyone who's ever moved knows how stressful moving can be. Throw in moving to another country and stress just goes off the charts. What advice can you give to someone to reduce the stress for him or herself as well as for their family?
It's very important for the newly relocated expat to find a restorative and invigorating activity to help reduce stress. It can be anything active, really, that they enjoy doing and that they look forward to. Moving, as you said, is very stressful. Add moving to another country, that's just magnified exponentially. You need to do something to be able to relax. It's also very important to be aware that your family's going through the same thing, and especially if you have children, to be able to discuss what you're feeling and your frustration honestly and openly.
What's the best way to deal with homesickness or culture shock while living in another country?
Enjoy the comforts of home every once in a while. For example, my kids love it when I make mac and cheese. I do it about every couple of weeks. I'll make mac and cheese with steamed broccoli and some fresh fruit, which was a dinner we used to have about once a week back home. And so the first time I did it here, you should have seen their eyes. They just absolutely loved it. Another thing you can try and do, for example, is watch your favorite TV shows on Netflix or Hulu if you're somewhere that has internet access. I watch Friends, episodes of Friends every weekend, and that again is just something very simple, but it's very comforting for me.
Any last words of wisdom for expats to ease their transition?
The most important tools for an expat are patience and a good sense of humor. Life is going to be very different.
If someone wants to learn more about becoming an expat or easing that transition, where can they go?
Well, I actually have a blog called puravidafamilia.com where I talk about our life here in Monteverde. It has a lot of practical information in general for expats moving, for people looking for a change in life, but also specifics about moving to Monteverde in Costa Rica.
Thank you very much for your time, Noemi. I hope you've learned something about easing the cultural adaptability process. To find out more, make sure to visit Noemi's blog. Have a great day.